Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
Well, hello and welcome to this Reporters Direct. Before we start, I really want to thank all of our subscribers. It is because of people like you who subscribe to the news that you watch and read, is that the print as an organization is able to function. We are able to go out into the field, report. Reporters Direct is a subscriber exclusive benefit under which the subscribers get to interact with the reporters, ask them questions about the recent travel, about their insights into various issues. And to tell you what, I was just looking at the number of questions. A lot of questions have come in. I have a laptop in front of me, so I'll look down at the laptop in between. And it's nice to see that there are so many people who've asked questions, and not just from India. There are people from the UK, from the UAE. Then, of course, you have from people from Philippines, Ghana, Botswana. It's amazing that the print community, the print family is so big that it is spread out throughout the world. And thank you for that. So before I take questions, I'd like to tell you that I traveled recently. I just came back on Friday night. I was traveling to the Eastern Army Command, basically to Assam and Arunachal Pradesh, which is under the 4 Corps, which is the Gajraj Corps, is as they say in the army. So this was a part of a trip that was organized by the army, in which not just me, there were other reporters from other organizations also who traveled to these various parts to get a first-hand account of what's happening at the LAC, about the situation at the LAC, and what both countries, India and China, are really up to in terms of infrastructure build-up, in terms of troop build-up, in terms of the new equipment that have been inducted into this particular area. Remember that India-China tensions have been on for several years, and this particular government, the Narendra Modi government, had reached out to China with a hand of friendship immediately after this government was sworn in. But things did not materialize. You had China going ahead and indulging in intrusions, transgressions, incursions, whatever one might call it, into Indian territory in May 2020 and in Eastern Ladakh. And since then, the tensions between the two sides have remained. And these tensions are not limited just to the Eastern Ladakh or to the northern sector, or as they say, the western side of the LAC, but also to the central sector as well as to the eastern sector. And this travel was to the eastern sector. To get a first-hand account, please do log into our print website under the defense, category. You would find a number of stories done by me from the ground. There are more stories that would be uploaded in the coming week. So there you go. So let's start taking in the questions. The first question is actually from Kishore Kumar. Well, he's from Chennai, and he's also a CEO. And his question is, at Arunachal near LAC, are the people of Arunachal in favor of Indian Army presence and comfortable and proud of the presence of such heavy fortification? How does the community connect with the Indian Armed Forces? Now, the situation in terms of heavy fortification, the heavy fortification is at the border areas. It's not necessarily, within the city limits. And even when, for example, in the city, you have multiple units of the army, the garrisons and all, they're away from the city limits, and there is no checks or anything that is conducted by the army. So, the civilians are able to travel on the same road as what the army vehicles do. The citizens there is, unlike in Kashmir, where there are multiple security forces which are involved and there are checks and balances in place, the situation in Arunachal Pradesh is much calmer. There's a great rapport between the armed forces and the local community. For example, the Tawang War Memorial that I visited, that is in memory of over 2,000 soldiers, Indian soldiers who had laid down their lives in 1962. This particular war memorial is actually maintained by both the army and the civil administration. So you have a monk from the Tawang monastery who comes there. He does his prayers, and it is something which is maintained by both the civil and the army. So it's in terms of the relation between the two, it's very smooth out there in Arunachal Pradesh. I have a question now from Nitesh Jain, and he's from Delhi. He's into the manufacturing thing, and he owns it. And he says, "Dear Snehesh, I like your analysis very much. Thank you so much for that and for subscribing to the print." He says, "Please tell me where will this standoff on the Ladakh border lead? Is there any solution in sight? I think that Pandit Nehru had a window of opportunity to solve this issue, but he did not have the conviction and the practical practicality of it." Nitesh, where is this headed to now? That's $1 million question. I think this is something that both everybody in the Indian establishment is really wondering, where is this headed to? Now, when this particular standoff began, in May 2020, I still remember I had done a story in August 2020 saying that this standoff is going to be a long one. At that time, what my sources had told me that it will, go through the winters itself. So that was once when I first reported it, and then in September is when 2020 is when I had mentioned that there is a fear of the LAC, the LOCization of the LAC. Now, LOCization of the LAC doesn't mean firing, like what happens in the LC, but what it meant in terms of deployment. And you had the army chief a week back, talking about the fact that the LAC, if this continues during the second winter, the LAC will more or less become like an LOC in terms of deployment. Now, what lies ahead is that there is hardening of positions by both sides. Both sides are building up on the infrastructure capability. Both sides have inducted a large number of troops. Each side have about 50 to 60,000 troops each in eastern Ladakh sector itself. You have number of inductions that have taken place of additional troops and equipment. You also have, a greater concentration of troops. Along with that, you have built up infrastructure for the troops. So it is not easy. There is a lot of investment that has gone into, at the LAC. And if you ask me how this, how I see this going ahead, well, this standoff is set to continue for a long time. We'll take back to the standoff that happened in the 1987. It lasted for about 7 years. I'm hoping that the standoff won't be there for long. But remember that the Chinese have been very aggressive, unlike any of the previous years. And also remember that, for the first time in years, shots were fired. There were fatal casualties on both sides in this, in this current standoff. So the standoff is much more serious than what one would think. So, sitting here in Delhi or other parts of the country and viewing it just through the media reports, the standoff is much more serious. It has the potential to escalate into anything else in future. And that is why, India has been ramping up its infrastructure to ensure that, there are enough troops and logistics and equipment in place to ensure that, any kind of situation is really clearly handled. Now, I have a question coming in from Pratyush Kumar. He's asking from London and he's into energy, chemical and utilities. He's a subsea engineer. And he's asking, "Hi, Snehesh, I understand you have your stint in Pakistan. I would like to ask you if you have any interesting stories you're able to share." Well, yes, I did have a stint in Pakistan while I was earlier working with the previous organization. And I was there for 9 months for 9 months before I was asked to leave by the Pakistani authorities. So it was supposed to be a tenure of about 3 to 4 years. But then I got done in 9 months. As far as my stint in Pakistan is concerned, it was interesting. It was enriching because I've always reported about Pakistan and the situation in Pakistan while sitting in Delhi. I used to cover agencies, who were looking after Pakistan, and so it was a different situation altogether when I was staying in Pakistan and reporting from there, and it gave me a closer insight into how this Pakistani society functions. I've always said this. The fact that there's a lot of talk about various kinds of peace initiatives. You will find some peace news talking about how great Pakistan is. The people are common people-to-people contacts are brilliant. But then I said, your perception of Pakistan all depends on whom do you interact with in Pakistan. For example, from military point of view, they understand each other. They know what functions. That's a different viewpoint that a military person will have. A different viewpoint that somebody from the intel agencies would have of Pakistan. There would be different viewpoint that maybe sports people will have, maybe film stars, musicians in the entertainment sector will have of Pakistan. It all depends on who do you interact with on the other side. And I can tell you for the fact that while I was in Pakistan, there was fairly I had made good friends, friends who would last me a lifetime in the civilian. But at the same time, I also understand how Pakistani society functions. It's controlled by the ISI, it's controlled by the army. It's a very dysfunctional society per se, if that's what you're asking me. But I again insist the people-to-people contacts are good. In Pakistan, on an average, especially in the Sindh and the Punjab sector, the Indians are looked at with more respect, fondness, because of the the previous connections that they had with India, because the families got split, they had relatives here, so that is one issue. Well, I have a question coming in from Majumdar from Dubai. He's into aerospace and defense sector. He's asking, okay, dear Shekharji, good afternoon on Dubai. I have been an avid follower of CTC from the very beginning and a huge fan. Well, even I'm a big fan of the CTC. A lot of work goes into making of the CTC, and I'm amazed by the fact that SG does it every day and so insightful. He's saying, I have a question which haunts me a great deal and would be extremely grateful if you or Snehesh G could provide some clarity on the same. Well, this has been sent to me, but this doesn't have the question. But please do write into the YouTube comments and try and answer your question later on. I have a question coming in from Aniruddha from Agartala, and he's asking, what is the point of having a security force when a political mob can beat people in front of them in daylight? Are we living in an autocracy, having a mask of democracy? Now, this is something which is very different from what I've traveled. I've gone to the LC. I'm not really sure what particular incident are you talking about. But I can tell you for the fact that, yes, we are living in a democracy. The democracy might sound dysfunctional, might look dysfunctional at times, but being in the democracy is the best thing that can happen. Well, okay, I have a question from Harsh Mandapaka, and he's into high-tech hardware, semiconductors. He's a senior staff engineer, and he's asking, how good is preparedness of Indian Army in Arunachal given Chinese big guns and rockets outrange Indian guns and rockets? Well, that's a very interesting question, how good the preparedness of the Indian Army in Arunachal Pradesh is. Having traveled to Arunachal Pradesh, I'll tell you the difference between Arunachal Pradesh and Ladakh. Now, Ladakh is like the Wild West, in the sense that it's vast area. It's over 800 kilometers of vast area, which is actually basically looked after only by one division of the Indian Army. You have the 14th Corps, which is there, but remember that the 14th Corps is also responsible for the Kargil site. So 14th Corps is looking at both Pakistan as well as China, and it's only the one division, the 3 div, which is technically looking after the entire LAC in Eastern Ladakh. And since the standoff began, of course, there are additional troops that have been deployed in Eastern Ladakh. There's also a particular strike corps, that is a one strike corps, which has been now rebalanced from the Western sector to focus on the Northern sector, that is in the Ladakh sector. So, but in the Northeast, in the LAC in the Eastern sector is about 1,300 odd kilometers long. And this traditionally has a 2 corps looking after the LAC. Now, 2 corps, 2 different corps looking after the LAC, the 3 corps. And when I say the 2 corps, remember that each corps has 3 divisions. So in Eastern Ladakh, you had 1 division looking after the LAC. In the Eastern sector, you have literally 6 divisions, 2 corps. Now, besides, of course, these 2 corps, there's, of course, the 33 Corps also, which is in part also looks after certain areas of the LAC, but it's not focused on the LAC per se. But you also now have the 17 Mountain Strike Corps, which has been reorbited, has been given an additional division, and it is also now focused on, the eastern sector of the LAC from an offensive point of view. So I can tell you for the fact that Arunachal, the LAC in Arunachal, is actually one of the most well-guarded LAC among anywhere, all along the LAC, right from Ladakh to Sikkim. Well, okay. I have a question now coming in from Raju S. And his question is, how does China's hypersonic missile affect defense of Arunachal Pradesh? Do we have adequate anti-aircraft defense? Will S-400 help? Could delay in replenishing our squadrons make us vulnerable? Could China attack to divert away from its economic crisis? Now, there are multiple questions. I'll take the first one, which talks about how does China's hypersonic missile affect defense of Arunachal Pradesh? Well, China's hypersonic missile does not affect the defense of Arunachal Pradesh, but yes, China has jumped leaps and bounds when it comes to military technology. The recent test of this hypersonic carrier is phenomenal. This was a test that was conducted in August, and the world came to know only in September. This is a test which has also taken the US by surprise. So it's not just, and everybody in the world has taken notice of it. Now, do we have adequate anti-aircraft defense? Will S-400 help? Now, well, the induction of the S-400 will certainly help. The S-400 is scheduled for delivery. The first tranche is scheduled for delivery by the end of this year. Whether we do have adequate anti-aircraft defense, we have deployed this year, about 3 months back, we've deployed the upgraded L-70 air defense systems, which now comes with automatic tracking and various subsystems, which make it much more formidable and reliable than its earlier. Remember that this L-70 is actually a system that was first bought in the 1960s, and it continues to remain. Of course, it has gone through a major upgrade by BL, but the fact remains that anti-air defense is something that needs to be really focused on. The S-400 will definitely help. Besides that, there are a number of missiles that have been deployed. You have the Bofors, the 150 howitzers. You have the M777 lightweight howitzers that have been deployed in Arunachal sector. You also have the Smerch as well as the Pinaka systems that have been deployed in. And as far as range is concerned, I'll give you a simple example. For example, the Bofors has a range in the plains of about 30 to 32 kilometers. However, in Arunachal Pradesh, due to the rarefied atmosphere, the range in Arunachal Pradesh is over 42 kilometers. So the range increases in Arunachal Pradesh, and the army took us to some of these locations, and all these deployment are being made keeping the distance in mind. So you don't want a missile in Arunachal Pradesh to target, let's say, deep inside China. That is not the purpose. You need systems in place in Arunachal Pradesh to target the immediate forward areas of the Chinese defenses, to thwart any aggression from them, any incoming PLA forces, or to even ensure that the PLA forces are not able to regroup. So the missiles, the rockets, and others that are used in Arunachal Pradesh is primarily to take out the Chinese forward defenses. Well, I have a question now. I have a question coming in from Sudipto Bobik. Sorry, this is from AS. And the question is why we lost around 9 soldiers in the recent counterterrorism operation in Poonch. Did we lack in tactics in spite of having so much modern tech that can see through jungles, drones, and all other weather conditions? Why are we still losing men? Well, this is a sad development that has taken place. 9 soldiers have lost their lives in 2 different operations in Poonch. The first was a lot of 5 soldiers who lost their lives. The second was 4. The operation continues at this moment. There is exact information is not coming in, but the fact is that there needs to be a serious recalibration that needs to be done on the fact that 9 lives have been lost. And forget 9 lives, even losing a single life is a serious matter. And I'm sure the armed forces will look into, since the operation is currently on, there are a lot of multiple inputs that I keep receiving in from the ground through sources in the army and other agencies, but I'm still to get a clarity on what exactly happened. And so hence I will refrain from speculating on this further, but no doubt about the fact that this is a serious issue, and this is something that needs to be really looked into on a serious front. There needs to be accountability that needs to be ensured to ensure that such goof-ups, I would say, because losing 9 lives is a major goof-up, doesn't take place in future. Now, I have a question coming in from Lieutenant Colonel. Hi, Lieutenant Colonel Dr. Vijendran. Okay. He, of course, he's into medical pharma and he's with Apollo Hospitals, which means that you're a retired Lieutenant Colonel, sir. And is asking, and his question is the LAC getting hotter, or are the Chinese rattling once again for a limited ops after freshening up? Well, Lieutenant Colonel, I'm sure you have your friends in the army, and you've been speaking to them. You have a better idea about the situation at the LAC than I would. More inside view of the situation at the LAC. But I can tell you for the fact that the LAC is definitely getting hotter. You have 50 to 60,000 troops from both sides who are deployed there. While we talk about friction points getting resolved, remember that these are only disengagement that has taken place. So instead of face-offs, sitting in face-to-face, they've moved apart by a distance, but the equipment, the additional artillery, the missile systems, the men continue to remain there. So it's a tense situation at the LAC. And, the fear is that any small incident could actually spiral out of control. And hence, India is trying to take as much precautions as possible. The infrastructure development activities that have been going on along the LAC have been sped up. There's a greater sense of urgency in the mind of both the civil and the military authorities to ensure that infrastructure and connectivity is ensured. For example, I visited the Sela, tunnel. Now, to reach Tawang, you have to pass through the Sela Pass. Now, Sela Pass is something which is visible, by the Chinese from their side. They can monitor every movement of traffic that is taking place in the Sela Pass. Besides that, the Sela Pass also, faces snowfall issues and bad visibility, which ensures that it's not a 365 days a week kind of a road, which hampers both civilian as well as military movement. And hence, you have a Sela Tunnel project that has been initiated. The work on this has been on a strong footing. The scheduled completion of the Sela Tunnel is August 2022, but it is hoped that this would be completed at least 2 months in advance. I visited the Sela Tunnel. It's phenomenal work that is being done out there, and the Sela Tunnel will ensure that all kind of military equipment, from tanks to artillery, everything is manages to reach forward locations smoothly away from the prying eyes of the Chinese. And the army has continuous 24/7 connectivity. The weather will not become an issue once the Sela Tunnel really opens up. Well, I have a question coming in from Vinayak Venugopal. And he's asking whether the attitude of this government in center and others who ruled are simply unacceptable, no vision for northeastern states. Why this mad rush for infra push all of a sudden, which was grossly neglected decades ago? Well, why there is a massive push for infrastructure? Well, you correctly mentioned that the infrastructure is really bad, and because of the ongoing standoff, the Indians have realized that there's a greater urgency on completion of these infrastructure projects. Remember that these infrastructure projects were actually initiated several years ago, but because of the current standoff, these projects have been sped up. Now, you're asking whether the attitude of this government in center, those who are ruling, are simply unacceptable. I don't know what attitude you are talking about, but there has been. I can tell you for the fact that had you visited Arunachal Pradesh 3 years back and you didn't visit it now, you would have seen the drastic change in infrastructure that has taken place. And if you visit Arunachal Pradesh 2 years later, or maybe a year later, you will again see a drastic difference. So that is the pace of infrastructure development that is taking place. I have a question from Vivek B. Kumar from Trivandrum. And he's asking, what are India's options if you want to take an aggressive posture against China in LAC itself? Should India play defense in LAC and play offense in the Malacca Strait? Well, I think it's a combination of both offensive strategy and defensive strategy. I've done a story on this, on how the Indian Army is focusing on technology and not more boots in the ground in the eastern sector, and also a combination of both offensive and defensive strategy. Well, as far as India being aggressive against China is concerned, India doesn't need to be aggressive against China. India is not looking at a war with any country. India has never fought has never ventured into a war on its own. War has been thrust upon it, and India has responded. I can. I think what India is primarily doing is ensuring that there are enough defenses in place, and there is enough infrastructure in place to ensure that um, options, including both offensive and defensive and offensive options, can be looked into if need be. Remember when the standoff first began in eastern Ladakh in May, it was the Chinese who came in, took the Indians by surprise, which ideally should not have been done. Indians should not have been surprised by it. But they did manage to get in and occupy territories. But what did India do? So in the intervening night of 29th and 30th August, India did a counter deployment. India went ahead and occupied the heights of the southern banks, or let's say the Kailash range, and occupied territory. Which really caused a lot of pain to the Chinese, and they were very eager that the particular engagement at both in the Pangong Tso, the northern and southern Pangong Tso, is resolved, which India eventually did. Now, that's a different question whether one would ask whether India did the right thing or not. But the fact of the matter is that it's a combination of both defensive and offensive strategy that will really work out for India. And I've always mentioned that offensive is the best, in the sense that even for enhancement in defense capability is very important to ensure that there is no war. So that is something that one should really focus on. Now, I have a question coming in from Padmakshi. And the question is, why did China object to the visit of Vice President Venkaiah Naidu to Arunachal Pradesh? How can they object? Well, frankly, Chinese can't object, but they can object. It's their wish. For example, the China can today object to me, talking to you or you asking me questions. So anybody can object to anything, but the fact remains that Arunachal Pradesh is an integral part of the country, and one doesn't need any permission to travel. Of course, you have the inland permit and all that is there, but for the Indians to move around anywhere, and why did China object? Well, because China thinks that China claims Arunachal to be its territory. It claims that Tawang is part of the larger Tibet. And so they lay their claim to the territory. But I can tell you for the fact that Arunachal Pradesh, the LAC in Arunachal Pradesh is actually one of the most heavily fortified and heavily guarded LAC in the entire lot. Well, thank you so much for your questions. It was lovely, to see that so many people have asked questions. I probably was not able to take some of the questions, but I'll try and answer them in the comments section. But once again, thank you so much for subscribing to The Print, for supporting us, for supporting me, my colleagues, to ensure that, we are able to, focus on our work. We are able to travel out. Remember that traveling is not cheap. Traveling involves a lot of cost. Even in this particular trip, while this is again completely, we pay for our own tickets, we pay for our stay, we pay for our travel. So this is not this is not a junket per se. So this all involves a lot of money, to have all this infrastructure in place to ensure that a proper report comes out. So thank you once again for subscribing to The Print. Please continue supporting us, and it's lovely to see that the Print family is so big. So once again, thank you so much.